I tried to do a little research, no, of course, before talking to people. So I learned a little bit more about the bike scouts, and it started when Yolanda happened. Is that correct?
Yes, 2013.
Yeah, can you talk about that?
Sure. On the day that it was actually the day before it made landfall, I was watching CNN, and then of course they had like a really in-depth coverage of the preparations of what was happening in the Visayas area because that was where it was expected to make landfall. And then as it was making landfall, I was seeing a lot of reports on television and on the web about what's happening. And then afterwards, of course, what happened was the usual. People had to stay in evacuation centers, so on and so forth, and the usual problems. They do have medical support, they have shelter, they have food, they have everything that they need from all of the other organizations that are doing noble work in helping people that are affected by natural disasters. But one of the things I noticed that is not provided to people who are victims of natural disasters, and actually even conflict areas. I've seen like a lot of documentaries in wars and other problem areas around the world, and there seems to be always a problem with communication. If you're brought to an evacuation center, or if you have to stay in your village and you're isolated there basically because of whatever is happening, you basically have no access to communication. You have no idea if your cousins in the next village are still alive. You don't know where they've gone. You have no way of sending them like a message that, oh, we're fine here, don't worry, we'll see each other at this place, so on and so forth. You have people have absolutely no way of doing that. And so one of the things that I asked myself was, what can we do to solve that problem? The original name of the bike scouts was actually Typhoon Telegrams, obviously because of Typhoon Yolanda. It was really designed for that. So people would be able to send messages to each other using volunteer bicycle messengers.
You
So
know,
hence the name Typhoon Telegrams. Yep.
I found it kind of surprising because like right now, we live in this internet age. I'm literally talking to you, and you're a couple of thousand kilometers away. No,
Yeah.
but I found that surprising because I guess once these calamities or natural disasters happen, I guess it's in a sense the people really do get cut off from everyone else.
Yeah,
Like what
that's true.
happens?
That's
Like
true.
what like
Well,
these stuff just what happens exactly?
Well, on a daily basis, we basically live inside the technologies that allows us to communicate with each other, to see each other, like this, for example. But in reality, the technology that we rely on to be connected to each other, which is basically social media, the internet in general, it's very fragile. The first thing that's actually the first thing to go whenever there's even if it's just a mild storm. If you really get unlucky, the tower falls down. For example, in places like, let's say, Calikoan Island in Samar, they have one tower to serve that area, southern part of Calikoan and Sulangan Island. So if that tower, and it did fall during Typhoon Yolanda, so everybody had zero access to communications. And it's not just in the isolated places, actually. Even in major towns, even in major cities. Like, for example, what if we get like a really powerful earthquake? Most of the towers, most of the communication systems that we have will actually fail, and that's been proven in the past 7 years, because of our experience responding to a lot of the natural disasters around the Philippines. That's the number one thing that goes. Of course, uh, we lose electricity, we lose water, but communications, it's very badly affected. It takes a long time before people can actually repair that thing.
So like for example, like let's go back to the Yolanda. Now, how long did it take till communications came back? I think you guys were there for, if I'm not mistaken,
four
4
months
months. Four
Yeah, four
months,
months.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
S-
Because
hmm.
in the case of Typhoon Yolanda, in places like Tacloban City, communication was back in a matter of weeks. I think not for everyone, but there were places that you could go to so that you could access the internet and then send messages on Facebook, for example. And then it took another month or so before it basically normalized. But that was just in the major cities, major towns. But out beyond that, where majority of the people actually live, it took a really long time before people had got their access to communication again. And so during this entire time, we have to remember that there are women, for example, who are pregnant in these isolated villages. There are people who have serious like medical issues that they need access to medicine or to medical advice or something, and a lot of other things. Even the way that people have to make a living, it's dependent on communications. And so without these things, for example, one specific example is the people who were looking for help from government agencies that would give them aid or maybe a loan, for example, so that they could restart their very small businesses, like a carinderia, like an eatery, for example. You had to apply for that for a small loan so that you could restart. But for you to be able to do this, you have to be able to communicate with the government agency. And a lot of people in isolated places, they can't do that because there's no transportation, and it's the distance is like 100, 200 kilometers. So it's not something that you can, like an ordinary person would want to walk or ride a bike or something, but we could. So that's why we work as volunteer bicycle messengers, and then we carry all kinds of things. The heaviest stuff that we carried back then were intravenous fluid. That was really really heavy. I basically wrecked my saddle because of that.
Oh,
So we had to deliver that for to hospitals who were running out of supplies, and then to the simplest things like notes. One of the most touching things that I had to deliver back in 2013 was a message, a very short message from a guy in Leyte. His note was very simple. It was like it just said, "Don't worry about us anymore. Don't worry about us anymore. We're alive." That was it. And he wrote that in Filipino. And so he gave a telephone number where we could send that. And so I tried calling actually the number, and then somebody picked up. And then I introduced myself as a bike scout. I told them what we do, and then I said, "I have a message for your brother," and he said, "No, not to worry, that he's alive." And then I guess the woman who answered the call, she sort of dropped the phone, and I could hear them laughing and crying in the background. And they completely forgot that I was still on the line. So but I guess from based on the reaction that I could hear from the phone, I guess they got the message. I delivered that message very effectively. So yeah.
that's crazy. That's something that for me, I take for granted, but like just the ability to connect to your family who's not there. I can't imagine what it must be like if you're in this area that's hard hit, and you just and then let's say you survive and then you're there, but you can't reach out to your loved ones, and then you don't know what your loved ones are feeling. So that's one of
Yeah.
the so is that one of the main things that you guys did? That's really it, no?
Yes,
The
actually, because we always talk about resiliency, but the greatest thing that affects resiliency in people is actually their sense of hope. Once a person loses hope, whatever it is, whatever the reason is, for the hope that that person is wanting for himself or expecting, usually it's contact with family members. It's just usually it's like, is my child still alive? Are my parents okay? So you could provide them with food, shelter, medicine, and everything else, and they would survive because of that. But hope, usually that's affected by the loss of communication. It's not being able to know. I always talk about it in a way that, for example, when we were kids, if we, for example, scrape our knee or if we crash our bike or something, the first thing that we do is we look for somebody to tell that we're hurt, not because they would actually be able to help us or feel better, but because um, it sort of makes us feel more comfortable, more safe that, oh, we're going to be okay because there's somebody who knows that I'm hurt. So it's sort of like that. It's human nature. So the service that the bike scouts provide is actually we're servicing the human nature, the need for hope, that feeds resiliency.